Eliza Orzeszkowa, the Argonauts. Thank you for every subscription. It's huge motivation for me. Chapter 13. She put up the last of her hair, fastened it with a fantastic pin, and said, turning toward her mother, I have such Tom Thumb boots that when I put them on, I shall be beyond the sea with 3 great steps. How does that plan please you? You give a shower of plans today, jested Malvina. A portrait, flight from the rod, America. A ball, exclaimed Kara, raising her head. Do you know of it, Marion? In a few weeks we shall have a real ball, a grand one. Your tale is curious, little one. Tell on, answered Marion. When talk is the question, there is never need to beg Kara twice. She sprang up from her knees and told of the hour which she had spent in her father's study a few days before. She had told her mother and sister of the plan of the ball, but how it rose she had not told. Something had prevented. Now she would tell them all. 3 gentlemen had visited her father, Prince Zeno, Count Charsky, and a third person whose name she did not remember, but he was a large man, tall and broad. His breast glittered with stars and crosses. She, Kara, wished to hide from the guests behind the bookshelves. There were shelves behind which she sat often, invisible herself. She saw and heard everything. It was a wonderfully comfortable hiding place, in which her only trouble was Puff, for when anyone came to the study he wanted to bark, but she squeezed his nose with her hand tightly, and he was silent. That day she did not go behind the bookshelves, for her father commanded her to sit in the armchair. So she sat there with dignity. Now she sat on the stool and showed them in what a posture she had sat in presence of her father's guests, her hands on her knees, bolt upright, with dignity on her rosy face. Puffy alone interrupted this dignity, she said. He crawled up behind her, put his paws on her shoulder, and touched her with his moist nose. One of the gentlemen turned then to her and said, You have a beautiful dog, young lady. He is very nice, answered she. And what is his name? Asked the man. Puffy, explained she. She did not laugh, for there was no cause. Puffy was really very nice, and he had a good name, but those gentlemen, while looking at her, smiled very agreeably, and one of them said to her father, How time passes. Not long ago I saw your younger daughter a little child, and now. The other interrupted. She is almost grown, and as tall it seems as her elder sister. We have only very rarely the pleasure of seeing your family in society this winter, said the other. Your wife and daughter pass a very secluded life this year, said the second visitor. My wife complains of frequent neuralgia, answered father, and then the unknown large man talked. Hitherto Kara, while giving the conversation of the 2 gentlemen, changed her voice, imitating the tones and posture of each. Now she repeated the words of the large man in the rudest voice that she could command. I have not yet had the honor of being presented to your wife and elder daughter, but I have heard so much, etc. Then they talked longer with her father about something else, and when going away gave her some nice compliments. She courtesied. She might say with confidence that she had played the role of a mature young lady brilliantly. Her father said after the departure of the guests that he was glad to receive the large man's visit. The large man might aid him greatly. Then he thought a while and said, Do you know what, little one? You must show yourself in society. Here Marion muttered in an undertone, He needs a new column in his temple. Irene smiled. Malvina feigned not to hear. Kara, given up to her twittering, twittered on. Then father said that Mama and Ira were leading almost the life of a cloister, that they received few persons, and went out little. That had the appearance of domestic misfortune, or of bankruptcy. Such an appearance was ugly in general, and harmful to business. To avoid this, there was need to arrange a reception, but grand, and as splendid as possible. The carnival would be over soon, and at the end of the carnival we would give a ball in which the little one would appear in society for the first time. Today, an hour ago, father said he would come to us at dinner, and would talk at length about this ball with Mama. Here Kara finished the narrative, which was somewhat of a dramatic representation. Marion rose suddenly from his seat. I must go, said he, standing rigidly and with a serious face. Stay, Marion, said Malvina in a low voice. On her face was a look of pain, a deep wrinkle appeared on her forehead, her voice was imploring. Marion looked at her, hesitated a while, then dropping into an armchair with the movement of an automaton, muttered, Let thy will be done. Let a pot be painted with the color of a son's love for you, mother. From the thought that he must meet his father soon, the interior of his heart began to desiccate. A servant announced the dinner. Kara sprang up from the stool. I will go to conduct father. She went to the door, but turned back from it, and, dropping on her knees before her mother, put a number of long, passionate kisses on her knees and her hand. Then, hanging on her neck, she whispered in a low voice, Golden, only, dearest mamma. And springing from her knees, she flew out of the room like a bird. What did that violent outburst of tenderness for her mother mean? No one knew, neither did she herself, perhaps. Was it a prayer for someone, or the assurance that she loved greatly not only that one, but her mother too? Or was it delight that at last she would see them both together? She flew like a bird through the drawing rooms, lighted by lamps burning here and there, till she pushed quietly into her father's study, and put her hand under his arm at the writing desk. All rosy, imitating the deep and solemn voices of the servant, she said, Dinner is served. Darvid felt a stream of warmth and sweetness flowing to his breast. Oh, you rogue, said he. You sunray, you little one. When he was entering the dining room soon after with Kara, Marian led in his mother through the opposite door. She was all in black silk and jet. Darvid inclined and touched his wife's hand with his lips. On Malvina's face there was a pleasant smile. I am so immensely occupied, said he, that I have not time every day to inquire after your health. I thank you. My health is excellent. At a rich side table 2 servants were occupied. At the table gleaming with crystal and silver stood Miss Mary, graceful and still young, with puritanic simplicity in her closely fitting garment, and with smooth hair over her calm forehead. The master of the house greeted her and expressed his regret that, because of business, he could see her only rarely. When all were seated at table, Malvina, with the experience of a trained lady of the house, began conversation. We have been talking just now of the United States, with which Ira and Marian have begun to be greatly interested. No doubt because of the exhibition at Chicago, said Darvid. It must be something colossal indeed. Miss Mary mentioned the Congress of Women which was to meet there. Malvina and Irene supplemented that statement with details. The conversation flowed on smoothly, easily, coolly. It was filled with various kinds of information. Marian took no part in it. He sat stiff, deaf, dumb, with fixed features. When he ate, his movements had the appearance of an automaton. Even his eyelids winked very rarely. He was a picture of apathy, contempt, and biliousness. Even his fair complexion had grown sallow, and his lips had paled. He caused exactly the impression of a wax doll in an elegant dress, with glittering eyes. Darvid, with some humor and playfully, spoke of the edifice which was to be erected in Chicago according to a plan by a female architect. I tremble for those who are to visit the building. In architecture, equilibrium has immense meaning, and for women equilibrium is most difficult. Women lose equilibrium so easily, so generally, so inevitably, almost. This was said in a manner quite airy and trifling. Still, it was unknown why. In the voice of the speaker certain biting tones quivered, and a pale flush came out on Malvina's forehead. Irene fell at once to talking most vivaciously with Miss Mary about the latest movement among English women toward emancipation, and Darvid himself, with some haste, expressed quietly, though with some irony, opinions touching these movements. A great bronze lamp cast abundant light on the table, which was covered with the brightness of silver and crystal. White-gloved servants, as silent as apparitions, changed the plates adorned with painted and gilded monograms. With bottles in their hands, they inquired about the kind of wine which they were to pour out. They served dishes from which came the excellent odor of truffles, pickles, rare meat, and vegetables. A number of wall lamps, placed high, lighted the sides of the dining hall, which was decked with pictures in brightly shining frames, and with festoons of heavy curtains at the doors and windows. When it left America, the conversation, carried on in French and English, turned to European capitals and to the various phenomena of life in them. English was spoken out of regard for Miss Mary, but French sometimes, for Darvid and his wife, preferred that language to English. Irene and Kara might have been considered as genuine English. The ready and accurate English, the pure Parisian French, the varied information, in an atmosphere of light falling from above on a table glittering with costly plate, the order and the dignified ornaments of the great hall. The grand scale of living seemed undoubted high life. There was a moment in which Darvid cast his glance around and threw back his head somewhat. His forehead freed itself from wrinkles. Smooth, clever, shining somewhat at the temples, it seemed to be carved out of ivory. His nostrils, delicate and nervous, expanded and contracted, as if inhaling, with the odor of wines and delicacies, the more subtle and intoxicating odor of his own greatness. But this lasted only a short time. Soon certain pebbles of seriousness and breaths of distraction began to interrupt his conversation and to dull his clear thought. Balancing in 2 fingers a dessert knife, he said to Miss Mary, "I respect your countrymen greatly for their practical sense and sound reason. That's a people. That's a people." He stammered somewhat now, a thing which, in his low and fluent speech, never happened. He was thinking of something else. That is the nation which said to itself, "Time is money," which also, again he faltered. His eyes, attracted by an invincible power, turned continually toward that point of the table where black jets glittered richly and gloomily, and then his lips finished the judgment which he had begun, which also possesses today the greatest money power. Here Marion spoke for the first time. "Not only money, England now leads the newest tendencies in art." This was spoken at the edges of his lips, without cooperation of other parts of his face, which continued fixed, and on Darvid's lips appeared his smile, of which people said that it bristled with pins. "The newest tendencies of art," repeated he, and the words hissed in his mouth somewhat. "Art is something splendid, but the pity is that it is turned into a plaything by wrongly reared children." Marion raised at his father a look from which a whole flood of irony rushed forth, and answered, with the edge of his lips, "He alone is not a child who knows that we are all children, turning everything into playthings for ourselves. The point is that there are various playthings." "Marion," whispered Malvina, with an alarm which she could not suppress. Darvid turned his face to her suddenly, and their glances, which till then had avoided each other carefully, met for a few seconds. But during that time, Darvid's eyes filled with the glitter of keen steel, and Malvina bent her face so low over the plate that, in the sharp light, one could see only her forehead, with its one deep wrinkle. But that same moment, Irene began to converse with her father about London, where he had spent a considerable time on 2 occasions. He answered her at once, spoke long, fluently, and interestingly, engaging also in the conversation Miss Mary, to whom he turned frequently and with pleasure. Again the conversation went on smoothly, easily, deliberately. Above the table, in place of the odors of meats and sauces, hovered the light odors of fruit and vanilla. When the dessert was served, Darvid spoke of fruits peculiar to various climates which he had visited in his almost ceaseless journeys. All at once he stopped the conversation in mid-career and turned to Kara, who struggled a few times with a dry and stubborn cough. "I thought that you had recovered entirely. But you are coughing yet. That is sad." On the girl's face, which was flushing in a fiery manner, there was an expression of sorrow or anger. Quickly and broken came the words from her lips, which were pouting like those of an angry child. "There are so many sad things in the world, father, that my cough is a bit of dust compared with them." This was an answer thoroughly unexpected, but the impression which it might have made was hindered at once by Irene through a laugh and an exclamation too loud, perhaps. "See where pessimism is going to fix itself. Is Puffy sick?" "Kara's remark is precocious but pointed," said Marion with the edges of his lips. Malvina, too, began to speak. Giving a small cup to her son, she inquired, "You like black coffee so well that I ought to reserve another cup, ought I not?" Marion made no answer. With a wrinkle on her forehead and a smile on her lips, she continued quickly and hurriedly, "I share your taste for coffee, Marianne. Some time ago I drank much coffee, but I saw that it injured my nerves and deprived me of sleep. It is very disagreeable not to sleep, and better to give up a favorite luxury than suffer from insomnia." Smiling and moving her head, she talked on with great charm, and with a sweetness which always filled the tones of her voice. She mentioned mere nothings, connecting opinion with opinion, just to talk, to kill time, or avoid other topics. Darvid raised his head somewhat, and looked at her through the glasses with which he had shaded his eyes until she bent her head before the gleam in those glasses, and her face sank very low over the cup, and was covered with an expression not to be hidden by a woman who wants to vanish through the earth, dissolve in air, become a shade, become dust, become a corpse, if she can only escape from where she is and from being what she is. Then Irene, with a light tap, dropping her cup on the saucer, began, "You must know well, Father, how they make coffee in the Orient." He knew, for he had been in the Orient, and in a way which was picturesque enough, he told about the Turks, how, sitting around in a circle, they put the favorite drink into their mouths slowly. They delight themselves with it, as dignified as magi and silent as fish. The time in which they give themselves to this absolute rest, composed of black coffee and silence, bears with them the name kaif. This word called laughter to the lips of all. Darvid laughed too. On all faces wariness grew evident. Kara's thin voice called out, "The Turks do well to be silent, for what good is there in people's talk? What good is there?" "Here is a little sage she is never satisfied with questions," said Darvid jestingly. "Capacity for criticism is a family trait of ours," laughed Irene. "Kara had been distinguished by curiosity from childhood," added Malvina with a smile. Even Marian, looking at his younger sister, said, "The time always comes when children begin to speak instead of prattling." Miss Mary, with an anxious forehead under her Puritan hair, said nothing. On the faces of all who spoke, anxiety was evident, and above the smiling lips wariness was present in every eye. Malvina rose from her chair. Darvid left his place, bowed to all with exquisite politeness, and advancing some steps, gave his arm to his wife. They passed through a small, brightly lighted drawing room, and halted in the following chamber, where the walls were adorned with white garlands, and the curtains and upholstering were of blue-watered silk. Beyond, in a small drawing-room, Miss Mary sat down to play chess with Marian. Kara took her place near them in the character of observer, and Irene unrolled in the lamplight a piece of church stuff, very old and time-worn, which the Baron had brought her as a rarity, and which she intended to repair by embroidering it with silk and gold thread. Darvid and Malvina stopped among the pieces of blue furniture in the tempered light of a shade-covered lamp. Malvina was very pale, and her heart must have beaten with violence, for her breath was hurried. At last that had come which she had waited for long and vainly, a positive and decisive conversation. With all her strength she desired an explanation, a change of some kind, and in any shape, if it would only bring a change in her position. She was waiting, ready to yield to everything, to endure everything, if he would only speak. He spoke, and said, "Tomorrow I shall go to a hunt on the estate of Prince Zeno, and as I go from there to a place where I have business, I shall return in 10 days, more or less. Immediately after my return, and during the last week of the carnival, there will be in our house a reception, a ball simply, the most brilliant possible. My business requires it, and public opinion concerning this family requires it also. I wish, too, that Kara should make her first appearance in society at that ball. I have drawn up, and will send you a list of persons to whom it is necessary to send invitations, persons of whom you might not have thought. The rest of society you know better than I do. I know that you can arrange such matters excellently, and I trust that this time you will do all that is best. The checkbook will be brought you by my secretary, whose abilities and time you may use without limit, as well as the checkbook. There is no need to hesitate at outlay. Everything should be in a style rarely seen in any house, or rather in a style never seen except in this house. This ball is needed for my business and for public opinion concerning our family, which opinion is a little, even more than a little, lowered." He spoke slowly and politely, with an accent of command at the basis of the politeness. At the last words he cast into her face a gleam of his eyes which was firm and penetrating. Then he bowed and made a move to go. "Aloysius!" cried Malvina with tightly clasped hands, and she began to tremble. How was this, a ball, and nothing more? The question with her was of things as important as human dignity, conscience, unendurable restraint, and fear in the presence of her children. He stopped and inquired, "What is your command?" She bowed her head and began, I wish to speak with you at length and positively." He smiled. For what purpose? We have nothing pleasant to say to each other. An unpleasant conversation injures the nerves more than black coffee. She raised her head, and with an effort to which she brought herself with difficulty, said, "Things cannot remain as they are. My position—" With an expression of profoundest astonishment on his face, he interrupted, "Your position! But your position is brilliant." He made a gesture which seemed to indicate everything which was in that drawing-room and in the whole house, but she blushed deeply, and like one in whom the sensitive place is touched, exclaimed, "But this is just what I do not wish any longer. I have the right to desire to be free, to withdraw, to cast from myself this glitter and go somewhere." With all her strength, she struggled against the tears which were overpowering her. He repeated with the profoundest astonishment, "You do not wish? You have the right?" Everything in him, cheeks, wrinkles on his forehead, pale lips, trembled with excitement now beyond restraint. But he was master of his voice yet. He spoke in low tones, but with a hiss. "What right? You have no right. You have lost every right. You do not wish. You have no right to wish or not to wish. You must live as it happens you, and as is needed. As to conversations and serious theatrical scenes, I want none of them, I who have not lost the right to wish. I am silent, and I will enforce silence. That is, and will always be, our modus vivendi, which moreover should be for you the easiest thing in the world to preserve. You have everything. A high position, luxury, brilliancy, even the love of your children as it seems. You have everything except. He hesitated. His habit of preserving in all cases correctness of form struggled with the excitement which had overcome him, and these words hissed through his lips in a low though envenomed voice. "Except the lover whom you have dismissed, on which deed I congratulate you, and my respect which you have lost, but without which you must live on to the end. On this subject we are talking now for the first and last time. We are talking too long. I am in a hurry to my work. I wish you good night." The bow which he made before his wife might seem from a distance full of friendly kindness. He withdrew with perfect calmness and freedom of manner. Still Irene went to her mother with a firm though hurried step, and with the piece of ancient stuff in her hand, she said, "I am sure that without your assistance I shall not be equal to my task. To restore this middle-age wonder requires taste, an eye, shading of colors. All this is beyond my poor ability." She stood before her mother, and among the large flowers on the cloth, which was changing from silver to sapphire, she indicated certain defects produced by time. Her eyelids blinked with marvelous quickness, and therefore perhaps she did not notice her mother's chalky pallor, trembling hands, and despairing expression of eyes. Apparently noticing nothing, she spoke in a loud voice and joyously. "You have an ocean of various silks left after so many things which we made in company. Let us search among them. Shall we go? They are in your chamber. Come, mamma. I am so impatient to begin the restoration of this beautiful ruin. You will help me to match the silks, will you not? Oh, how many beautiful things you and I have made together with these 4 hands of ours, which were always in company." And they were in company then. She thrust her hand under her mother's arm, and holding the strip of silver and azure stuff, she escorted the very pale woman in black jets through the brilliantly lighted drawing-room, past the chess table at which were sitting 3 persons, through the dining hall, where servants were hurrying, through her mother's study, in which both had passed most hours of their life, till she came to Malvina's bedroom, where, amid the yellow damask furniture, a shaded lamp was burning. In the twinkle of an eye, Irene drew the brass door-bolt, and with face turned toward her mother, with cheeks which flushed immediately, she took Malvina's 2 hands in her own. Enough of these secrets, of things partly said, and of barriers raised between our hearts and lips. This hurried whisper burst from her like a current from a covered vessel filled with heat and opened suddenly. "Let us tell each other everything, or no, say no word. I know everything, and neither will I speak. But let us counsel, let us meditate together. Oh, mamma." Her form, usually erect and distinguished, bent and trembled like a reed, and her lips, famous for irony and coldness, scattered a shower of kisses on the hands and face of her mother, whose chalky paleness was covered by a flame of blushes. "Ira!" she exclaimed. "Forgive. May God forgive me." Unable to utter more than these words, she dropped on her knees and touched the yellow cushion of the low sofa with her head. She seemed shattered, annihilated. Then Irene grew cold again. Sober thought and strong will shone in her eyes. She bent over her mother, placed her delicate hand on her shoulder, and began almost with the movement of a guardian. "Mama, I beg you not to despair, and above all not to torture yourself with that which you consider a reproach and a sin. Never say to your children, 'Forgive,' for we cannot be your judges, I least of all. You have ever been kind to us, and as loving as an angel. We have lived with you. We love you, I most of all. Remember at all times that a loyal heart is near you, and a kindred one, for it is the heart of a daughter. You must stand erect, have will, think out something, frame something, have decision, save yourself." Looking into her mother's face with a strange smile, she added, "And save me, perhaps, for I too am a poor, unwise creature. I know not myself what to do." Malvina raised her head, straightened herself, and rose from her knees slowly. "True," whispered she. You so long and so earnestly have I wished to speak of you, and had not the courage." "Well, let us speak now," said Irene, and again putting her hand under her mother's arm, she led her to the ottoman, which stood in the tempered lamplight. "The door is bolted. No one can disturb us. We will have a talk, a long one. Only we must be reasonable, calm. Look at things and ourselves clearly, know definitely what we want, try to bring our plans into action, know how to wish." At these last words she imitated the nasal voice of Baron Emil, laughed at it, and dropped down on the carpet before Malvina had seated herself on the low ottoman. Irene, taking her mother's hands in her own, fixed her eyes on her eyes and began. "Mamma, if you wish, I shall become very soon the wife of the famous medievalist, Baron Emil, and we shall all three of us go to America, beyond the seas." "Oh, no, no!" exclaimed Malvina, who bent toward her daughter, and put her arms around the young woman with such terror as if she were shielding her from a falling house. "Not that! Not that! Something different, entirely different." At that moment some impulsive or impatient hand shook the door latch. "Not permitted!" cried Irene, and she asked, "Who is there?" There was no answer, but the latch moved again, though in a timid and, as it were, imploring manner. "You cannot come in," repeated Irene. There was a rustle against the sofa outside. A light and quick step moved away. "Kara," whispered Malvina. "For her as well as for ourselves, there is need to end this position at the earliest," said Irene with a sudden frown. It was Kara. She had left the door of her mother's room with drooping head, with a great frown on her forehead, and no thought for the little dog, tugging at her skirt as usual. Half an hour before, when Marian and Miss Mary had risen from chess, she rose too, pushed her hand under her brother's arm, and said, "I have something to say to you." Her seriousness was so evident that Marian answered with a smile, "If your speech is to be as solemn as your face is, we shall have little joy. What have you to tell me?" Without answering, she led him through the blue drawing-room to the next one, more faintly lighted. Here she halted, looked around, and seeing only inanimate objects, asked, "Why have you quarreled with father?" This question in her mouth astonished him, and he asked in turn, "Why do you wish this information? You might dream of the role of peacemaker." Without a shade of laughter, with forehead somewhat wrinkled beneath bright curls of hair, she repeated the question, "Why have you quarreled with father? Do you not love him? Why can you not love him? For me, father is an ideal. He is so wise, noble, great. When he was so long away, I dreamed about him, wanted his return, imagined how happy we should all be when he came. But that is not the case in any way. All in the house seem to be at variance, angry, disappointed. I see this well, but I cannot understand why. Why? Why is it?" Marian fixed his eyes on her attentively and laughed, but his laugh was not sincere, it was forced. "Curiosity," said he, "is the first step toward hell, and the surest road to premature age. You will grow old before your time, little one." "This is not curiosity," interrupted Kara. "There is some kind of trouble here, I know not what it is, but something so unpleasant and dreadful. Sometimes it seems to me that someone will die, or that something will vanish, and that in general something awfully bad will happen to somebody. I know not what it is, but it is very bad. I know not what it is, but it is something. It is something." Marian frowned and interrupted her. Since you know not what it is, nor to whom it will happen, nor how, what do you ask me for? Am I a master of the Kabbalah to interpret childish dreams for you? This is not a dream. It is something of the sort that wanders in the air, touches, breathes, goes away and comes again, like a haze or the wind. You are grown up, and all say that you are clever. I beg you to explain this. I think, too, that if you wished, you might so arrange matters that all would go better. It is your duty to do this. Do you not love Mama, Father, Ira? I love them immensely. I would give up everything for them. I do not understand even how any person could live without loving somebody with full heart and all strength. I could not. But what use? I am not grown up, not wise. I cannot even understand anything. With you it is different, but you have quarreled with Father. You do not even love him, I see that well. For what reason? Why? My brother, you might, at least, tell me something to explain. She stopped, and he stared at her. A look of indecision increased on his face. Something of concern and a trifle of tenderness gleamed in his eyes. It might have seemed for some seconds that he would put his arm around her, or stroke her with his palm, and smooth away the wrinkles from her childish forehead. But Arcadian feelings were in the past, so he began to speak coldly and deliberately. My dear, you are torturing your little head for nothing with affairs of this world. You are not equal to them yet. I cannot tell anything to you, or explain anything, for you and I are at the two opposite poles of thought. You speak of devotion, duty, and love, like a governess, for you have a governess yet. As to my disagreement with Father, you know nothing of what caused it. But to be a kindly brother, I will answer a few words. Two developed and energetic individualities have met in this case and come into collision, like two planets. Two egotisms also. Do not show such frightened eyes. Stupid nurses frighten children with a beggar, a gypsy, or an egotist, but mature people know that egotism is a universal right, and moreover, good business. Be an egotist. Take no trouble about what does not concern your own self and strive to develop your own individuality. Keep this in view, play joyously with Puffy, and go to sleep early, for long watching spoils the complexion of young ladies. Begin to think tomorrow of the dress which you will wear at that brilliant ball, planned by our Father to torment Mama, and you will have success. Do not mind those mists, dreams, and other visions which come and go. They are conditions of mind which are very much subject to fancy and other painted pots. This is all that I, your great-grandfather, can tell you or mention as advice. Look at Ira and imitate her wisdom, which knows how to make sport of the world around her. Good night to you, little one. He pressed her hand in such a friendly manner that he heard it, and then went away, disappearing at the other end of the chamber. Kara stood for a time with her eyes fixed on the floor. Then she raised her head and looked around at the void in which silence had fixed itself. The globe lamps burning, here and there, at the walls, filled the drawing room with a hazy half-light in which, here and there, glittered golden reflections, and the features of faces and landscapes flimmered on pictures. Farther on, from the shady corner of the other drawing room, slender and swelling vases appeared, partially, portions of white garlands on the walls, the delicate dimness of dulled colors on Gobelin tapestry. Farther still, in the small, warm, and bright drawing room, lights were burning in the candelabra, and a crown of glittering crystals were hanging like icicles, or immense frozen tears. Farthest off in the dining room, with its dark walls, gleamed a great lamp in its hanging bronze, like a point of light above the table. This point seemed very far from where Kara was standing, and in all the space between her and it there was not a voice, not a rustle, nothing living. Only once a waiter, dressed in black, passed on tiptoe through the dining room, emerged into the full light of the lamp, and disappeared behind a door. After that there was no voice, no step, no noise, nothing living. All at once a clock began to strike 9. Its metallic sound inclined to bass, and was heard clearly in the silence which had settled in the vacant chambers. 1, 2, 3. At the 4th stroke, another clock was heard in a distant study. Its sound was thinner and more like singing. These two seemed to be a voice and its echo. The sounds from these resembled a mysterious conversation carried on by things that were inanimate. Kara hurried then, and hastened through the drawing rooms on tiptoe toward her mother's boudoir. Through her widely opened eyes looked fear, and under bright curls her forehead was thickly wrinkled. Remember to subscribe.